The bridge of the UES Titan hummed with quiet activity as Commander Jake Morrison reviewed the morning patrol reports. The massive warship drifted through space near the outer rim of the Sol system, its sensors scanning for anything unusual in the vast darkness between stars. Morrison had been commanding the Titan for 3 years now, and most days brought nothing more exciting than checking cargo ships and monitoring deep space communications. Communications Officer Lisa Grant sat at her station, monitoring the usual chatter of merchant vessels and colony transports. She adjusted her headset and ran another sweep of the communication frequencies, expecting to hear the same routine traffic reports and navigation updates that filled her days. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed as she focused on the steady stream of radio signals flowing through space. Then something changed. A new signal broke through the background noise, faint at first but growing stronger by the second. Grant frowned and leaned forward, adjusting the gain on her equipment. The signal was unlike anything she had heard before. Not the clean digital transmissions of human ships, but something organic and desperate. She could hear fear in the alien voice, even though she could not understand the words. "Commander Morrison, I'm picking up an unknown transmission on the emergency frequencies," Grant called out, her voice cutting through the bridge's quiet atmosphere. "It's not human, sir. The signal is coming from the Kepler 442 system." Morrison left his command chair and walked over to Grant's station. He could see the concern on her face as she worked to clean up the signal. The transmission crackled and popped with interference, but underneath the static they could hear something that made Morrison's blood run cold. It was the sound of someone dying. "Can you translate it?" Morrison asked, placing a hand on the back of Grant's chair. "I'm running it through the translation protocols now, sir," Grant replied, her fingers dancing across the controls. "The computer is identifying it as Zephyrian. They're one of our allies, the peaceful ones from the outer colonies." The translation program worked quickly, and soon the bridge filled with the translated voice of a Zephyrian communications officer. The words came in broken fragments, interrupted by static and what sounded like explosions in the background. The alien was reporting that massive ships had appeared in their system without warning. These ships were unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than being built. Morrison listened in growing horror as the Zephyrian described how these bioships had begun attacking their colonies without provocation. The aliens spoke of weapons that fired concentrated stellar plasma, cutting through their defensive shields like they were made of paper. Entire moons had been stripped of their populations in a matter of hours. The Zephyrian fleet had tried to fight back, but their ships were no match for the invaders. "They're asking for help," Grant said quietly, looking up at Morrison with wide eyes. "Sir, they're begging anyone who can hear this message to come to their aid. They say their people are dying." Morrison felt his jaw clench. The Zephyrians had been humanity's first contact with alien life, and they had proven to be valuable allies. When Earth had faced the colony wars 20 years ago, the Zephyrians had shared their advanced medical technology, saving thousands of human lives. Their crystalline-skinned people were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and their incredible healing abilities. "Send this transmission directly to Earth Command," Morrison ordered. "Priority Alpha, and prepare a message probe with our current sensor data. I want Admiral Carter to know exactly what we're hearing out here." Grant's fingers flew over her controls as she compiled the transmission package. Meanwhile, Morrison called his senior staff to the bridge. Within minutes, his tactical officer, navigation specialist, and chief engineer had gathered around the command station. Morrison played the Zephyrian distress call for them, watching their faces grow grim as they listened to the desperate pleas for help. "What do we know about this enemy?" asked Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, the ship's tactical officer. Turner was a veteran of several deep space conflicts and had never seen him look genuinely worried before. "Nothing," Morrison replied honestly. "The Zephyrians are describing bioships, organic technology that we've never encountered. According to their reports, these ships can absorb energy weapons and regenerate damage almost instantly." The message probe launched from the Titan's hull, carrying the distress signal and Morrison's report toward Earth at faster than light speed. It would reach Earth Command in less than 6 hours, but Morrison knew that every minute counted. The Zephyrians were peaceful people who had never developed serious military technology. Without help, their entire species could be wiped out within days. On Earth, Admiral Helen Carter was reviewing fleet deployment reports when the priority transmission arrived. She had been expecting routine updates from the outer patrol ships, not a desperate cry for help from one of humanity's closest allies. Carter was a veteran of 40 years of military service, having worked her way up from a junior communications officer to the highest position in Earth's Defense Force. Carter listened to the transmission 3 times, her expression growing darker with each replay. She had met Zephyrian ambassadors on several occasions and had great respect for their culture and their contributions to galactic peace. The thought of these gentle beings facing extinction at the hands of an unknown enemy filled her with cold fury. The Admiral called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Within 2 hours, every senior military commander on Earth had gathered in the war room deep beneath the lunar surface. The massive holographic display showed the location of the Kepler 442 system and the estimated positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, her voice carrying the weight of command that had kept Earth safe for decades, "our allies are under attack. The Zephyrians have been our friends since first contact, and they have never asked us for anything beyond peaceful cooperation. Today they're asking for our help, and we're going to give it to them." The council members looked at the tactical displays showing the distances involved. The Kepler 442 system was almost 200 light-years from Earth, requiring a massive logistical effort to reach in time to make a difference. Several commanders expressed concern about committing so many resources to a battle they might not be able to win. Carter listened to their concerns, then stood and walked to the holographic display. She pointed to the Zephyrian colonies, small dots of light in the vast darkness of space. These people saved thousands of human lives during the colony wars. They asked for nothing in return except our friendship. Now they're facing extinction and they've turned to us for help. The room fell silent as Carter continued. "I'm authorizing Operation Thunderstrike. We're going to send the largest fleet in human history to the Kepler 442 system. Every available ship, every trained crew, every weapon we can spare. The Zephyrians stood by us when we needed them, and now we're going to stand by them." The orders went out within hours. Across Earth's orbital shipyards, crews began preparing vessels for immediate departure. Supply ships loaded provisions for an extended campaign, while weapons specialists checked every gun and missile system. The call went out to every human colony and military base. Earth was going to war, and they needed every ship that could fly and fight. The next 48 hours transformed Earth's orbital space into the busiest place in human history. Ships that had been scattered across dozens of star systems began converging on Luna Station, the massive military complex that orbited Earth's moon. Admiral Carter stood on the command deck of her flagship, the UES Defiance, watching as vessel after vessel emerged from hyperspace and took their assigned positions in the growing armada. The Defiance was Earth's newest and most powerful warship, a massive dreadnought that stretched over 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull bristled with weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat, and its armor could withstand direct hits from the largest known weapons in the galaxy. Carter had hoped she would never need to use the ship for anything more than showing the flag at diplomatic ceremonies. Captain Nicole Stevens guided her carrier, the UES Eagle, into formation near the center of the fleet. The Eagle's flight decks buzzed with activity as hundreds of fighters and bombers were prepared for combat. Stevens had commanded the Eagle for 5 years, but she had never seen her crew work with such focused intensity. Every pilot knew they were preparing for a mission that might be their last. Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner supervised the loading of his squadron's fighters in the Eagle's main hangar bay. Turner was known throughout the fleet as one of the best pilots alive, with a reputation for bringing his people home, even from impossible situations. His squadron had earned legendary status during the siege of Europa Station, where they had held off enemy forces for 3 days against overwhelming odds. The pilots gathered around Turner as he briefed them on what little intelligence they had about their enemy. The bioships described by the Zephyrians were unlike anything in Earth's military databases. These organic vessels appeared to grow their weapons and armor rather than manufacturing them, and they seemed capable of healing damage that would cripple traditional ships. "We don't know how fast they are or how they fight," Turner told his pilots, looking each one in the eye. "What we do know is that our friends are dying while we stand here talking. We're going to get there, we're going to hit these things with everything we have, and we're going to bring the Zephyrians home." Technical Officer Ben Clark worked 18-hour shifts in the fleet's engineering sections, ensuring that every ship's weapons and defense systems operated at peak efficiency. Clark had served on a dozen different vessels during his 20-year career, and he had never seen such a massive undertaking. The logistics of coordinating hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members, and millions of tons of supplies was staggering. The fleet carried humanity's most advanced military technology. Plasma cannons that could slice through asteroid fields lined the hulls of the battleships. Kinetic bombardment systems capable of cracking planets hung in the weapon bays of the heavy cruisers. The newest addition to Earth's arsenal was the quantum torpedo, a weapon that could phase through enemy shields and armor to strike at vital systems hidden deep inside a target. Dr. Maria Santos established trauma centers across multiple ships, knowing that the coming battle would produce casualties on a scale the fleet had never experienced. Santos had studied every piece of available data on Zephyrian physiology, preparing her medical teams to treat both human and alien wounded. The crystalline-skinned aliens had a completely different biology from humans, requiring specialized equipment and techniques. The Zephyrians were silicon-based life forms whose bodies incorporated living crystal matrices that served functions similar to human organs. Their blood was a luminescent fluid that carried both nutrients and information throughout their bodies. Santos had worked with Zephyrian medical specialists in the past and knew that treating their injuries would require careful attention to their unique. Biology Intelligence Officer Tony Davis briefed the fleet commanders on everything they knew about the enemy forces. The information was fragmentary and disturbing. The attackers appeared to use ships that were grown rather than built, with hulls that could regenerate damage and weapons that fired concentrated stellar plasma. Most troubling was evidence that the enemy operated with a hive mind mentality, suggesting that they might be facing a completely alien form of intelligence. Davis had analyzed the communication intercepts from the Zephyrian system and identified patterns that suggested the bioships were coordinated by a central command structure. If the human fleet could identify and destroy this command vessel, it might disrupt the entire enemy operation. However, finding the command ship among what appeared to be thousands of biovessels would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of his ship, the UES Hammer, watching as the massive fleet formed up around them. Blake was a veteran of the Titan Nebula conflicts, where he had learned that space combat was unlike any other form of warfare. In space, there was no cover, no terrain to use for advantage, and no room for error. Ships that made mistakes simply ceased to exist. The Hammer was a heavy cruiser designed for close-range combat, with thick armor and powerful short-range weapons. Blake's crew had trained for years in the art of ship-to-ship combat, practicing maneuvers that would bring them close enough to enemy vessels to use their devastating plasma cannons. They specialized in the kind of brutal close-quarters fighting that decided space battles. Admiral Carter called a final briefing for all ship commanders before the fleet's departure. The meeting took place in the Defiance's main conference room, where holographic displays showed the layout of the Kepler 442 system and the estimated positions of the enemy forces. The room was filled with the best commanders in Earth's military, men and women who had spent their careers preparing for a moment like this. "We're facing an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities," Carter told the assembled officers. "What we do know is that our allies are counting on us. The Zephyrians have been our friends for 20 years, and they have never asked us for anything. Today they're asking for their lives." Carter activated a holographic display that showed recent transmissions from the Zephyrian system. The messages were becoming increasingly desperate as more colonies fell to the bioship attacks. Entire worlds had gone silent, their populations either dead or captured by the mysterious invaders. Time was running out for the peaceful aliens who had always relied on diplomacy rather than military force. The fleet would jump to hyperspace in coordinated waves, with the fastest ships arriving first to begin reconnaissance while the heavier vessels followed. The journey would take 18 hours at maximum speed, pushing the ship's hyperspace engines to their limits. Some of the older vessels might not survive the trip, but Carter was willing to accept those losses if it meant getting help to the Zephyrians faster. As the meeting ended, each commander returned to their ship to make final preparations. Weapons were loaded, shields were tested, and crew members said private prayers or wrote final letters to their families. Everyone understood that they were about to face the unknown, and not all of them would be coming home. The signal came at exactly 800 hours Earth Standard Time. One by one, The ships of Earth's greatest fleet activated their hyperspace drives and vanished into the space between dimensions. The journey to save humanity's friends had begun. The hyperspace journey felt like an eternity, even though it lasted only 18 hours. When the human fleet emerged at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, the sight that greeted them was worse than anything they had imagined in their darkest fears. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a living disease, their bioships pulsing with sickly green energy as they systematically destroyed everything in their path. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Defiance, staring at the tactical display that showed hundreds of organic vessels scattered throughout the system. The bioships looked nothing like the clean metal constructions that humans built. Instead, they resembled massive sea creatures that had somehow learned to swim through space, their hulls rippling with what appeared to be muscle tissue and their surfaces covered in weapon pods that looked like cancerous growths. The Zephyrian colonies were in ruins. 3 of their 5 worlds showed no signs of life, their surfaces scarred by massive energy weapons that had burned away entire continents. The remaining 2 planets flickered with scattered pockets of resistance, small groups of defenders who somehow continued to fight against impossible odds. Between the planets, the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet drifted in silent testimony to their brave but futile attempt to protect their people. Commander Jake Morrison brought the Titan into formation with the rest of the fleet, his sensors working overtime to catalog the enemy forces. The bioships moved in patterns that seemed random at first but gradually revealed a disturbing intelligence. They were not just attacking randomly, but were systematically harvesting resources from the destroyed colonies, feeding on the very planets they had conquered. Captain Nicole Stevens launched her fighters as soon as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Lieutenant Commander Turner led his squadron directly toward the nearest group of bioships, determined to test their defenses before the main battle began. The human fighters were sleek and fast, built for speed and maneuverability, but as they approached the enemy vessels, Turner realized they were facing something completely outside human experience. The bioships responded to the approaching fighters by growing new weapon systems right before their eyes. Organic cannons emerged from their hulls like flowers blooming in fast motion, tracking the human ships with movements that were too smooth and organic to be mechanical. When they fired, streams of superheated plasma filled the space between the fleets, creating a deadly maze that the fighters had to navigate at incredible speeds. Turner rolled his fighter into a steep dive, barely avoiding a plasma stream that would have vaporized his ship instantly. His wingman was not so lucky. The plasma caught the other fighter's port wing, melting through the armor and causing the ship to spin out of control. Turner watched helplessly as his wingmen ejected just seconds before the fighter exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in human military databases. Instead of firing discrete shots or bursts, the bioships produced continuous streams of plasma that they could move like whips, lashing out at targets across vast distances. The plasma appeared to be some form of concentrated stellar matter, burning at temperatures that could melt through the strongest known materials. Admiral Carter saw the plasma streams, cutting through space, and immediately understood that conventional tactics would not work against these enemies. She ordered the fleet to spread out into a wide formation, keeping the ships far enough apart that the plasma weapons could not target multiple vessels at once. The human fleet began its approach, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Captain Blake's heavy cruiser, Hammer, charged directly toward the largest group of bioships, its thick armor designed to withstand close-range combat. As the Hammer closed the distance, Blake could see that the enemy vessels were even more disturbing up close. Their hulls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like living lungs, and he could swear he saw what looked like eyes opening along their surfaces to track his ship's approach. Bioships tried to surround the Hammer with extending tendrils that emerged from their hulls like massive tentacles. Blake ordered his crew to fire everything they had at these appendages, and the Hammer's plasma cannons cut through the organic material like hot knives through butter. The bioship recoiled, its surface rippling with what could only be described as pain, and Blake realized that these were not just ships, but actual living creatures. Dr. Santos worked frantically in the medical bay as the first casualties began arriving from the fighter squadrons. The pilots who had been hit by the bioship's plasma weapons suffered burns unlike anything she had seen before. The alien fire seemed to continue burning even after the initial contact, eating through flesh and bone with a hungry energy that defied medical understanding. Technical Officer Clark monitored the fleet's weapon systems as the battle intensified. The quantum torpedoes were proving effective against the bioships, their phase technology allowing them to pass through the organic hulls and detonate inside the creature's vital organs. Each successful hit caused the target bioship to convulse and lose coordination, sometimes causing it to fire on its own allies in its death throes. The enemy response to the human attack was swift and terrifying. Hundreds of bioships that had been spread throughout the system began converging on the human fleet, their movements coordinated with a precision that suggested they were all parts of a single organism. As they moved, they began to change, growing new weapon systems and armor plating that adapted to counter the human tactics. Intelligence Officer Tony Davis analyzed the enemy movement patterns and made a disturbing discovery. The bioships were not just coordinated, but were actually learning from each encounter with human weapons. Ships that survived attacks were somehow sharing information with the rest of the fleet, allowing them to develop countermeasures in real time. Commander Morrison watched as a group of bioships surrounded one of the human destroyers, the UES Lightning. The enemy vessels extended thousands of thin tendrils that wrapped around the human ship like a spider's web. The Lightning's crew fired their weapons continuously, cutting through the organic bonds, but more tendrils kept appearing faster than they could be destroyed. The Lightning's captain made the ultimate sacrifice, detonating his ship's reactor core rather than allowing his vessel to be captured. The explosion vaporized the surrounding bioships and sent a clear message to the rest of the human fleet. These enemies would show no mercy, and they could expect none in return. Captain Stevens coordinated her fighter squadrons as they darted between the massive capital ships, striking at the bioships' weapon systems and trying to create openings for the heavier vessels. The fighters were taking terrible losses, but they were learning how to fight these organic nightmares. They discovered that hitting certain spots on the bioships' hulls caused system-wide failures, as if they were striking nerve centers that controlled entire sections of the creatures. The battle raged across millions of cubic kilometers of space, with ships dodging between planets and using asteroids for cover. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1, but they had advantages that the bioships lacked. Human ships could change tactics instantly. Their crews could adapt to new situations without waiting for orders from a central command, and most importantly, they were fighting to save their friends. As the battle entered its 7th hour, the true nature of human warfare began to reveal itself across the Kepler 442 system. While the bioships fought with overwhelming numbers and terrifying organic weapons, humanity brought something to the battlefield that their enemies could not understand or replicate: the ability to think, adapt, and improvise in the middle of combat. Commander Morrison coordinated a breakthrough maneuver that would have been impossible for any species that relied on central command structures. Using hand signals and short-range communications, he directed 3 squadrons of human ships to execute a complex flanking movement that split the enemy formation. The bioships, expecting the humans to continue their frontal assault, found themselves caught between multiple attack vectors as human vessels appeared from unexpected directions. The Titan's advanced sensor arrays had been working continuously since the battle began, analyzing every aspect of the bioship's behavior and construction. Morrison's science team had identified patterns in the enemy fleet movements that suggested the presence of a command vessel somewhere among the hundreds of organic ships. This command ship appeared to be coordinating the entire enemy swarm through some form of biological communication network. Admiral Carter received Morrison's intelligence report and immediately understood its significance. If they could identify and destroy the command vessel, it might disrupt the coordination that made the bioship fleet so effective. She ordered all available ships to begin scanning for the largest and most heavily defended bioship in the enemy formation, knowing that the command vessel would likely be protected by the strongest forces the enemy could deploy. The search did not take long. Deep within the enemy fleet, hanging in space like a diseased moon, was a bioship that dwarfed all the others. Its massive bulk pulsed with neural activity that even human sensors could detect, sending streams of organic signals to every other ship in the fleet. Thick clusters of smaller bioships surrounded it like antibodies protecting a vital organ, but Carter knew they had found their target. Captain Blake's heavy cruiser Hammer had been fighting a running battle with a group of medium-sized bioships for the past hour. His crew had discovered that the organic vessels had weak points where their nervous systems were most concentrated, and they had been targeting these areas with devastating effect. Blake's gunners had become expert at reading the ripples and color changes on the bioships' hulls that indicated where their nerve clusters were located. Dr. Santos continued her desperate work in the medical bays as casualties poured in from throughout the fleet. She had developed emergency treatments for the strange burns caused by the bioship's plasma weapons, using a combination of human medical technology and healing crystals provided by the Zephyrian survivors they had rescued from the colonies. The crystalline aliens worked alongside her human medical teams, their natural healing abilities proving invaluable in treating the worst injuries. The Zephyrian survivors had also provided crucial intelligence about the bioship's weaknesses. During the initial attacks on their colonies, some Zephyrian scientists had managed to analyze fragments of destroyed bioships. They discovered that the organic vessels relied on a complex network of neural pathways that could be disrupted by specific types of energy weapons. This information had already saved dozens of human ships from destruction. Technical Officer Clark's engineering teams performed what could only be called miracles as they kept damaged ships operational through jury-rigged repairs and creative solutions. When the carrier Eagle lost main power after a direct hit from a bioship's plasma cannon, Clark's crew literally rebuilt the ship's power core while enemy fire raged around them. They used spare parts from 3 different ship classes and components, salvaged from destroyed fighters to create a hybrid power system that actually worked better than the original. Lieutenant Commander Turner led what remained of his fighter squadron in a desperate attack against the bioships surrounding the enemy command vessel. His pilots had learned to work in perfect coordination, using their superior speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of the organic ship's plasma weapons. They had developed a tactic of striking the bioship's nerve centers and then immediately breaking away before the creatures could retaliate. The fighters discovered that the bioships became confused and disoriented when their neural networks were damaged. Some would begin firing randomly in all directions, while others would simply drift in space as if they had suddenly forgotten how to move. Turner realized that the organic ships were not individual vessels, but were more like organs in a larger organism, completely dependent on their connection to the central command structure. Intelligence Officer Tony Davis had been analyzing the bioship's communication patterns and made a breakthrough discovery. The organic vessels were not just sharing tactical information, but were actually sharing consciousness itself. When one bioship learned something new, that knowledge was instantly transmitted to the entire fleet through their biological communication network. This explained how they had been adapting so quickly to human tactics. However, Davis also realized that this shared consciousness was both a strength and a weakness. If the humans could overload the communication network or disrupt the central command ship, it might cause a cascade failure throughout the entire bioship fleet. He immediately transmitted his findings to Admiral Carter, along with a recommendation for a concentrated attack on the command vessel. Captain Stevens repositioned the Eagle to launch a coordinated strike against the enemy command ship. Her remaining fighters formed up in attack formation, while her ship's heavy weapons prepared to provide covering fire. The Eagle had taken heavy damage during the battle, with entire sections of the ship sealed off due to hull breaches, but Stevens' crew continued to fight with determination that impressed even veteran officers. The attack on the command ship began, with a massive bombardment from every human vessel that could bring its weapons to bear. Plasma cannons, kinetic weapons, and quantum torpedoes streaked across space toward the massive bioship, creating a light show that could be seen from the outer edges of the system. The command vessel's protective escorts moved to intercept the incoming fire, but there were simply too many weapons coming from too many different directions. Commander Morrison coordinated the final phase of the attack, using the Titan's sensor arrays to guide the other ship's targeting systems. He had identified what appeared to be the command ship's primary neural center, a massive cluster of organic tissue that pulsed with energy and seemed to be the source of the communication signals that controlled the entire enemy fleet. Turner's fighter squadron made their attack run directly into the heart of the enemy formation, their ships loaded with quantum torpedoes set for maximum penetration. The bioships tried to stop them with waves of plasma fire, but the human pilots used every trick they had learned during the battle to weave through the deadly energy streams. Several fighters were destroyed, but Turner and his remaining pilots reached their target and released their weapons directly into the command ship's neural center. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system as the quantum torpedoes detonated inside the command vessel's brain. The massive bioship convulsed like a dying animal, its hull rippling with waves of neural feedback that seemed to cause it incredible pain. And then suddenly, something extraordinary happened throughout the enemy fleet. The death of the command ship sent shockwaves through the entire bioship fleet that were visible even to human sensors. As the massive vessel's neural center died, every other organic ship in the system began to convulse and writhe as if they were experiencing physical pain. The coordinated attacks that had made the bioship so dangerous suddenly stopped, replaced by random, confused movements that showed the fleet had lost its guiding intelligence. Admiral Carter watched from the bridge of the Defiance as hundreds of bioships simply stopped moving, drifting in space like dead fish floating on the surface of a pond. Others began firing their weapons randomly, sometimes hitting their own allies in their confusion. The shared consciousness that had made them so effective had become their greatest weakness when the Central Command was destroyed. Commander Morrison quickly recognized the opportunity and ordered all human ships to press their attack while the enemy was disorganized. The bioships that were still capable of fighting back did so with desperate fury, but without coordination they were no match for human tactics and firepower. One by one, the remaining organic vessels were hunted down and destroyed by the Earth fleet. Captain Blake's heavy cruiser, Hammer, found itself facing 3 bioships that had somehow maintained enough function to continue fighting. However, these creatures were clearly damaged, their hulls flickering with unstable energy patterns and their movements jerky and uncontrolled. Blake's crew methodically destroyed each one, using their experience from the earlier battle to target the organic ship's nerve centers with precision strikes. Lieutenant Commander Turner led his surviving fighters in sweeps through the debris field, searching for any bioships that might still pose a threat. His squadron had been reduced to less than half its original strength, but the pilots who remained had become expert at fighting the organic vessels. They could read the color changes and surface patterns that indicated a bioship's condition, allowing them to quickly identify which ones were still dangerous. The cleanup operation took 3 days as human ships systematically hunted down every remaining bioship in the system. Some of the organic vessels had hidden among the asteroids or behind planets, trying to escape the destruction of their fleet. However, human persistence and superior sensor technology made it impossible for any of them to avoid detection for long. Dr. Santos worked around the clock treating the wounded from both sides of the battle. The human casualties numbered in the thousands, but her medical teams had developed effective treatments for most types of injuries. More challenging were the Zephyrian survivors they rescued from the destroyed colonies. Many of the crystalline aliens had suffered severe trauma from watching their worlds burn, requiring both physical and psychological care. The Zephyrians who had survived the bioship attacks emerged from hidden shelters scattered across their remaining colonies. Their crystalline forms caught the light of their system's star as they watched human ships patrol the space around their worlds, ensuring that no enemy vessels remained to threaten them. Many of the aliens wept openly when they realized that help had actually come, that they were not going to die alone in the darkness. Technical Officer Clark coordinated the massive salvage operation that followed the battle. The human fleet had suffered significant damage during the fighting, with 37 ships either destroyed or damaged beyond repair. However, Clark's engineering teams managed to restore most of the damaged vessels to operational status using parts salvaged from destroyed bioships and creative field repairs. The organic technology of the bioships proved fascinating to human scientists. The ships appeared to grow their components rather than manufacturing them, using biological processes that were completely alien to human understanding. However, some of the bioship materials could be adapted for use in human technology, particularly in the areas of self-repair systems and energy storage. Captain Stevens used the Eagle as a mobile command center for the rescue operations, coordinating the evacuation of Zephyrian civilians from the damaged colonies. Her flight decks, which had launched fighters just days before, now served as landing platforms for rescue shuttles carrying alien refugees. The sight of human and Zephyrian crews working together to save lives showed that the alliance between the two species was stronger than ever. Intelligence Officer Tony Davis spent weeks analyzing the wreckage of bioships and the data collected during the battle. His reports would eventually lead to the development of new defensive systems designed to counter organic technology. The bioships had used biological communication networks that were nearly impossible to jam using conventional methods. But Davis discovered ways to disrupt these signals using specific energy frequencies. The return journey to Earth took longer than the original trip because the fleet was escorting thousands of Zephyrian refugees who needed transport to safe worlds. Many of the crystalline aliens chose to settle on human colonies where they could contribute their medical knowledge while rebuilding their lives. The cooperation between humans and Zephyrians during the evacuation laid the foundation for an even stronger alliance. Admiral Carter addressed the combined human and Zephyrian crews before the fleet departed the Kepler 442 system. Her words were broadcast throughout the fleet and recorded for transmission back to Earth. She spoke about the price of freedom and the responsibility that came with power, reminding everyone that they had not just won a battle, but had saved an entire species from extinction. The fleet's arrival at Earth was greeted with the largest celebration in human history. Millions of people gathered at viewing stations to watch the battered but victorious ships return home. The crews were welcomed as heroes, but Carter made sure that the focus remained on what they had accomplished together rather than individual glory. Commander Morrison found himself promoted to admiral and given command of a new deep space exploration fleet. His experience fighting the bioships had taught him valuable lessons about the dangers that might exist in unexplored regions of space. The Titan was rebuilt and upgraded with new weapon systems based on technology learned from studying the organic vessels. Dr. Santos established the first interspecies medical research facility, where human doctors worked alongside Zephyrian healers to develop new treatments for injuries and diseases that affected both species. Her work during the battle had shown that cooperation between different forms of life could achieve things that neither could accomplish alone. Years later, when other species in distant star systems faced similar threats, they knew exactly who to contact for help. The story of how Earth's fleet had answered the Zephyrian call for aid spread throughout the galaxy, carried by traders and diplomats to every inhabited world. Humanity had proven that they were more than just another spacefaring species. The message would go out across the stars whenever someone needed help, and the response would always be the same. Earth's battle fleet would answer in force not because they had to, but because that was what humans did. They protected their friends, they honored their commitments, and when someone sent a call for help, they came running with everything they had.